So growing up, I was a pretty good kid. Um, Growing up in Campbelltown and sort of any area that has housing commission in Sydney can be pretty rough. And if you don't grow up sort of tough, it can be a rough place to grow up. I sort of went towards soccer more, so 3 nights a week I was in soccer. So that took up a lot of my time. I wasn't really dragged into a lot of the stuff that a lot of the kids would have been. A lot of kids, 15, 16, around that age, they're already pretty much stealing cars, doing drugs. Their parents are junkies. My parents weren't like that. Luckily, my parents are really good people. So I grew up, my dad pushed me into soccer straight away because that's what he done. So that was my life since I was 4 years old up until 18. That's all I would do. And I was known as like the soccer kid, the kid that was going to make it in soccer. And then just one year, I was the captain the year before, and just one year I just didn't get picked. So I sort of decided to give it a year off and do my own thing. I was always a very tough soccer player and tough kid, but just in a good way, not in a scallywag sort of way. Yeah. So that year I decided to take it off, and that year is the same year that I had a close friend of mine pass away in a car accident. Giving away soccer gave me a lot more time to hang around friends and a lot more free time to get into trouble. So it was probably my last year of high school. I started hanging around a lot of older boys so I was 16, 17. They were 19, 20. Sorry, bro. So I was 19. A lot of them were 19, 20 years old, and I was still under 18, so I couldn't go out anywhere. So what I used to do is so they would hang out with me and not go to bars, I would convince them I'd find house parties for us to go to. So people would invite me to their house parties because I used to get along with a lot of people. They'd invite me to their house parties and they'd say, listen, you can come, but please don't bring your friends. So I'd convince my mates not to go out. I'd say, listen, I know where this house party is. He's not allowed to come, so we're going to have to get you in there somehow. So we would rock up 3-4 carloads of us, and we'd go to these parties, and we'd pretty much rock up, knock on the door, and they'd see me and be like, Ando, you can come in, and everyone would just rush the door and walk in. So by the time they're in there, there's no saying no to them. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of the guys I was hanging around were very rough. Like, they were stealing cars. They were doing all that sort of stuff, doing drugs, drinking a lot. So we'd go into these parties, and nearly every single party would end up in an all-in brawl. So coming from that area, you either had to know how to fight, or you had to know how to get beaten up. Do you know what I mean? So it was a lot of that sort of stuff going on. I had a lot of friends before the age of 18 get stabbed. So probably 3 or 4 friends stabbed. One of them got stabbed through the lung. That was just sort of a normal thing. A lot of glassings, a lot of bottling. And coming from Campbelltown, there's so many different housing commission areas. So Campbelltown is just one big area in Sydney. But within Campbelltown, there's about 5 or 6 housing commission areas, and everyone disliked each other. So you'd go to a party, and there would be people from Claymore there, people from Ambervale, people from Rose Meadow, and all these people would not like each other. So I can tell you a story about one party I went to. So one party I went to, it was a girl from my school. We'd gone there, went in there. There was it was out of control, and the kids' parents must have had like a trophy room full of like signed gloves, signed memorabilia, and all that sort of stuff. And I remember everyone started raiding it and taking signed Costa Zoo gloves, signed memorabilia. And I remember the kid's dad, or the kid must have been a hunter, and he come out with like a rifle. And this is by the point like everyone was pretty much leaving the party, and he come out with a rifle, and he said, whoever's got my dad's stuff, and he put the gun in the air. And there was a girl the people that I was hanging with, there was a girl that we were with, and she sort of looked at him and said, you're not going to do anything with that, and just punched him square in the jaw. And and we were just we were just flying home, 4 or 5 cars down the freeway, And on the way back, you see about 10 cop cars going the other way because I think he shot into the air. And we were only 17, 18. So there was another party where we went to, and we all went in, and a lot of boys from another area came, and we sort of got along with them. They were a lot rougher than what we were. They grew up in a really rough part of Campbelltown. And I remember they all come in, and the girl was like, I don't know how to get them out of here. Like, I really don't want them here. I don't want my house smashed up. And then all of a sudden you hear her walk inside and you heard her scream. And then I was like, what's going on in here? So I've walked inside, and she goes, all my parents' cars are gone. So there was 3 or 4 cars in the garage that they'd grabbed the keys for inside the house and taken the cars, you know what I mean? So that we're only 16, 17 then. So that was already happening. That was just normal to us, like stolen cars. There was a car that somehow come in our hands once, and I remember it got burnt at an oval, and I remember we were 16 and we were laying at this oval on a hill watching the fire brigade. So we lit it on fire and we were watching the fire brigade rock up, and we just thought it was so funny. Like, we're laying there on this hill. We didn't think of the consequences. Like, we didn't think of them fire brigade people have to rock up and put this fire out. Could have blown up in their face, and we're lying there on this hill, like laughing, drinking alcohol, watching the fire brigade try to extinguish this car that's on fire in the oval. Do you know what I mean? So that was just a normal sort of thing. And that's when my life sort of started to change. I was lucky I wasn't into drugs or anything like that. But at that time I did start selling drugs. To the kids that are sort of going through that right now, I know what I could say about that is, I know you think it's fun and games, but it just takes that one little thing for somebody to get really hurt or die. And you don't realize, like, that's somebody's stuff that people have worked hard for that you're stealing. Them fights, all it takes is for one kid to get hit his head on the concrete, and he's dead. And you've changed a whole family's life forever. Your whole life is never going to be the same again after that. Like, we thought it's fun and games, and we're really lucky that none of that happened. But like, yeah, them fights, stealing things, like, you don't know what that's doing to change people's lives. Like, yeah, it's just not a nice thing to do. Like, growing up, you just think, man, that's so stupid and childish. Like, and I know it's just a part of being an adolescent, but it's just really silly, man. Like, there's a lot better things you could be doing with your time than getting up to that sort of stuff, yeah. I could tell you about something that did, I think, traumatize me and change my life. Like, so around the same age, there was a friend of mine that I feel like this changed my life a lot as well. There was a friend of mine that was selling a lot of pills, and we were still only 17, 18 years old, not even 18, 17 years old, and he made a lot of money off selling drugs when we were younger. And word had gotten around that he'd saved up money from doing it, and we're only young kids, so we're still not sure to this day who done it. But I remember being in his house, and he lived with his dad at the time, and I remember I was upstairs in his room, and I heard a knock at the door, and his dad said, like, so-and-so, there's people here for you. When he's gone down there to answer the door, there's people have kicked through the door, hit his dad with a baseball bat, so his dad got baseball batted, and we're 17 years old, like, we're kids, you know what I mean? All I remember is them yelling, get on the ground, get on the ground. So they've ran up the stairs. I'm a kid, man, I shit myself. I've hit him behind his bed, and I've sort of popped my head up to have a look what was going on, and all I seen was 2 men in balaclavas running through the house, and his 2 sisters were there at the time, and they were yelling at them, where the fuck's the money, where's the money? And they said, we don't know where any money is, and I was laying behind this bed, like, just hoping that they wouldn't come in there, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was going on, and I remember them saying, where's the money? And they were saying, we'll beat your heads in. And the girls are like, we don't know where the money is, you can take our phones if you want. And I remember them finally, I heard one of them say, I reckon the cops will be here soon because the kid got away. So they said, let's go. And I remember them running downstairs, and I remember finally, like, I laid there for another 10 minutes because I was too scared to come out. And I remember finally coming out and finding my friend's dad, and he had blood coming down his face. I remember walking out the front of the house, and by that time my friend had ran to one of the boys' houses down the road, and a couple of carloads of my friends have rocked up, and they said, where are they? And I said, man, I don't know. I was hiding in his room. So they said, jump in the car, we'll go look for him. So I remember us driving around the streets looking for these people. But like, man, you don't realize it at the time, but when you get older, you think, man, that must have, like, I couldn't even imagine a 17-year-old kid now having someone with balaclavas and baseball bats running into their house, their family's house. Like, that would have traumatized his sisters, his dad, everyone that was involved in that house. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I feel like that really messed with me as a kid as well. So sort of made me go on a path to be sort of a tougher person. So that sort of stuff never happened to me again. Do you know what I mean? So after that sort of stuff happening, I feel like that was when I started getting involved in crime a lot more, because I was more standoffish. I was a pretty nice kid. I'd just do things because my mates were doing things. But at that point, I was like, you know what? Like, it's time for me to start being that sort of person, which is it could have went one or either two ways. I could have started removed myself completely from that and started being a nice kid. But I think to me, which is a stupid thing, I just went the opposite, which I was like, I'm not going to be scared of anyone ever again in my life. Like, for me, that was like the turning point. Like, I'll be the person people are scared of. Do you know what I mean? So that's when my life sort of changed in that direction, which is the wrong direction to go. That should have made me pull my head in and say, listen, I'm not going to be that guy anymore. I think a lot of kids, when they turn that way, they're the kids that are scared themselves, and they don't want to be the victim, so they decide to become the victimizer. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're the ones that say, I'm not going to be scared anymore, so I'm going to be that person that people don't want to mess with, because it's just their insecurities. They're the ones that are scared, so they're like, I never want to put myself in that frame of mind again, so I'm going to be the tough one, so no one's ever going to scare me that way ever again. So that's sort of the way I went. So at that point, I pretty much... Do you want me to go into the next one? Yeah, that's when I pretty much started turned to selling drugs. I still hadn't taken drugs at that point, which was a good thing. But I turned to selling drugs and getting a lot more involved in crime. I wasn't really a thief, which is a good thing, because I don't really like thieves, but I did start selling a lot of drugs. And at that point, I reckon that went on for about a year, and there was a lot of fights, a lot of robbing people and all that sort of stuff. And then about a year or two later, when I was 19 years old, that's when I met someone that was a Hell's Angel. So there was three of us at the time that were sort of looking... We'd come to that point where we were at the end, like, there was no more we could do as the kids that we were. So it was either hang up the boots, or move on to a more advanced criminal, move further on in our criminality. And at that time, like, if I would have met someone that was let's just say a boxer, and he said to me, hey boys, why don't you put your energy into coming down to the boxing gym? And like, someone that I looked up to, you know what I mean? If it was someone that, because the people we looked up to growing up, like, were the dudes driving the Porsche 4 drives and the guys driving the Range Rovers. We didn't have many people to look up to in our area. So they all had the good looking girls. They all had the money, the big gold chains. Everyone would talk about them like, oh, that's so-and-so, when they'd walk into a party. And it was something that, in coming from that sort of life, it's something that you looked up to. But if we would have I wish I met someone like me now that was like, hey man, I've lived that life. Like, you're smart. You don't need to do them sort of things. Like, you can get ahead in life through working hard or business. Do you know what I mean? But I just sort of met a person that I looked up to, man, like someone like an older brother. And he was a good man. And I met him, and he just said, boys, you're already doing the things that, like, you're already doing all that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So why don't you just start making proper money and come hang around us? I'll introduce you to some people, and you can, like, level up in what you're already doing. And in my eyes, I was thinking, if I do this, And I think I was still looking for a sort of a family to be involved in from the soccer thing. So I was sort of looking for something that um, I was looking to belong to something. So that's why when he said that, I was thinking, man, I can belong to it. And the way that they come about and approach you is like, it's like a family. Do you know what I mean? Like you have people that will, no matter where you go in the world, you're going to be looked after. No matter what happens to you, like that you're going to have a couple hundred boys to back you up. Do you know what I mean? So it was always something that, yeah, like it was something to thrive for. Yeah. So I always knew, like, if I was ever to get into trouble, there was a lot tougher boys that would have my back. A lot of people would be more scared of you. You know what I mean? And it would push you further in that sort of life. It was just a very what's the word? A very yeah, like something to look up to, like something.
Role model.
Yeah, it was like looking up to a role model. Yeah. So yeah, that's when everything else. That's when life really started to happen there. Mind you, in the meantime, none of my family knew this. My family thought I was still just this nice kid that was just going out and staying at friends' houses. So at 19 years old, I was involved in the biggest motorcycle club in the world. Yeah, that were known all around the world in every country. And I got thrown in the deep end quick. I joined, and I was as a prospect, I was chucked with probably one of the highest people that you could be. I used to drive him around a lot. I'm not going to say his name, but so I was with him nearly every day, and he's passed away now. But he was a very nice man. I got along really well with him, but I seen a different, like, because we're from Western Sydney, so we see like the Housing Commission and all that sort of stuff. But then I started to see like what Sydney City was like, you know what I mean? And all the underground things that go along with that. And it just really opened up my eyes. Like, it's like the stuff you see in movies, like a lot of places that they would look after, a lot of hidden like restaurants and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So it was like a real enticing thing. Like, it would just open up your eyes and you're like, man, like you'd go home and tell your friends, like, bro, we're going to these hidden restaurants where they let you in the back door, and like they tell you when the police get there, and you know what I mean, you'd know 10 minutes before the coppers were there and you're escaping out another back door. And you'd go to businesses that were sort of owned and ran by them, and everyone treats you very differently, like when you're there, you know what I mean? Like, you'd walk into a restaurant and people would be like, boys, come, we've got a private room for you, come sit down, you know what I mean? So it's a lot of like, you get a lot of respect. People treat you a lot differently when you're in a bike club. And I know how that entices kids to do it, because you see all the lavish lifestyle, the nice things, how they get treated, and man, it's a really good feeling. But it's just not, it's all smoke and mirrors, you know what I mean? Like, you meet a lot of good people, and there's a lot of good men there, but there's a lot of it's a lot of darkness too. It's not a good place to be living in your life. It's just a very dark and sort of lonely place. Yeah, like you think you have all these people and really you don't, and it's not a nice thing. So I was a prospect for probably a year and a little bit. We've done a lot of things as a prospect. So the first time that I'd opened my eyes was when we had to go to an area which is ran by another club. And I remember they're saying, oh, we're going to go to this area, and if there's any people in the other club, we'll confront them. So we're in this area, and I remember looking down the street and seeing maybe 40 or 50 boys walking up the street, and there's a lot of police trying to stop them from coming up the street. And I sort of looked at a couple of the guys that were with, we were maybe with a group of maybe 3 or 4 people, and I looked at them and I said, man, are these the people that we're supposed to be like looking for, you know what I mean? And man, it all of a sudden hit me, and I was like, man, what the hell are you doing? Like, I'm a 19-year-old kid walking, and there's 30 or 40 boys walking up the street, and I'm thinking, my life's about to end. And as they got closer, I sort of started seeing shirts, and I noticed that they were with us, and I was like, just this thing of relief just dropped over me, and I'm like, oh, these boys are with us. So it sort of it was a really good, like, man, after that, like, walking the street with 40 or 50 boys, like, just completely changes how you look at life. Like, you are untouchable. And a lot of stuff like that was happening, and then it come to a point, like, I became a member. So a member for maybe 4 or 5 years, and a lot of things happened in that time, and that's why I feel like I've got a lot of trauma from then. You don't realise it then, but you realise it 10 years down the track how much it affects your life. I met a lot of good people. I won't talk bad about them, but there's a lot of dark things you have to do. Just like, as me, I was always a person that would want to put my hand up and be like, hey man, I'll come with you. You know what I mean? There was one thing that happened that really changed the way I looked at things. There was a time we were at war with another club, and there was a guy that the other club was sort of looking for, and he come and approached me and said, hey man, these boys know where I live. Do you mind coming to mine tonight? There's a couple of boys that are already coming. Do you mind coming to mine, sitting out the front of my place, and just in case these boys rock up? And I was like, yeah man, all good, like, I'll come. No, you don't even need to ask, you know what I mean? I'm there. And I started becoming really close with a lot of tough, staunch boys in the club, and I don't know why they took a liking to me, and they sort of heard the conversation. They come up to me and they said, bro, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm going to old mate's place tonight. I'm going to go sit at his joint in case these boys rock up. And they said, man, are you dumb? What, you want to be target practice? And I didn't think of it like that. I just sort of as like, yeah, I'm going to help. I'm putting my hand up. I'm helping out the boys. Do you know what I mean? And they said, bro, you're not going to sit at somebody's house and wait to be killed. You know what I mean? So I was like, man, you're right. So I went and seen the dude, and I was like, hey, bro, I'm going to do other things tonight with the other boys. Like, I can't go and sit at your joint. And he said, yeah, that's all good. And one of my best mates that was in the club at the time, he was next to me when I said it, and he looked at the guy and said, hey, bro, I'll go instead of Ando, and I'll come sit at your joint. And he said, yeah, all good. And I said, all right. So I went my own way that night. I got a call later that night off one of the boys saying, hey, bro, just to let you know, Tyrone was killed last night. Was killed like an hour or two ago. And he was the guy that put his hand up to go to that house instead of me. So boys had driven past that house and obviously fired shots off. And he was one of the people that got shot, and he died at that set. And he had 2 kids. And that would have been, like, I live with that every day now. Like, that was supposed to be me. I was supposed to be at that house. At the last minute, I said no. He went instead of me, and that's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. Do you know what I mean? He was one of the kindest people I ever met in my life, and to this day, I still write to his relatives on his death anniversary, and I still, like, wish him love every anniversary and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, but that's sort of the stuff that you live with. And kids these days, like, you don't know what that feels like when one of your closest friends gets killed and it's supposed to be you. Like, why? You start to think, why me? Why was I the one that didn't go to that house that day? Like, what was I meant to do in life that was so important that he couldn't live and I died? Do you know what I mean? So that's when a lot of how I looked at things started to change at that point. But I was still wrapped up in that life, so I was still doing all them things for another couple of years, and a lot more lives were taken in that time. So a lot of people lost their lives over things like money, chicks, a lot of women, just over girls. And you start to think, now that I've left, all these people are good men that are in this thing, they're just lost, all right? So when you leave, you start to meet people from other clubs, and you start to think, why are we hating these guys that grown up the same way we grew up? They've lived in housing commission. They grew up in a rough area where their parents didn't look after them, you know what I mean? Why are we hating these guys? They're the exact same as us. but we hate them because they wear a different patch than us. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it doesn't make sense to me now. Like, yeah, it's just.
How did you justify it at the time?
At the time, you just think they're the enemy. You just think they are killing my friends, so let's kill them. Do you know what I mean? And man, I've been shot at more times than I could count, and it's not a good feeling. And you think back now, and you think, man, like, you tell people and say, oh, yeah, I've been shot at, and I've shot at people, and you think, and people are like, what? That's nuts. But at the time, you're thinking it's just so normal. Like, you're just living that life. Doesn't even faze you. But like now, man, like at the time, you're just like, that's your life. That you don't even think about it. You don't lose 1 ounce of sleep. I never had anxiety, depression. I never had anything back then. But I was just covering everything with drugs, man. Like, every night I was snorting a ball of cocaine so my mind wasn't thinking about things. Like, I was making a lot of money back then, and I was spending it just as quickly. Like, and you surround yourself with friends, just like you'd beg friends not to go home just so they'd stay and party with you. You'd surround yourself with strippers just so your mind didn't have a minute to think. So I would party all night, and then come to the end of the night when people would want to leave, you'd eat a sleeping tablet and go to sleep, wake up the next day. And I was never by myself. Like, I was surrounded by people 24/7. It was like I couldn't live in my own head. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, you don't realise until you leave that life how much it actually affects you. So going from this life of not having any anxiety, any depression, like, you can carry a gun on you 24/7 and not think of the consequences. You can hurt people and not think twice about it. You can be shot at and not even have a second thought about it an hour later. From going from that to then leaving the club, and that's when life really starts to hit you. When you have time to think and you're away from that life and you try to get your life together. Like, when your brain is in chaos, you don't have time to think. So when you remove yourself from that chaos, that's when the mind starts playing tricks on you, and you start to go crazy. Like, after leaving the club, I moved away. I made a decision if I wanted to become a new man, I had to start fresh. And I moved away, and I remember it clearly. I remember the first night that I moved to where I moved to. I rented a room off a lady. She was about 50 years old. And I remember it clear as day. I was sitting there and I'm watching the TV series Power. And I remember laying in this nice, comfy bed, and I could hear people at this bar out my window. And I'm laying there, and all of a sudden, like, I remember it clear as day. Everything is like it happened yesterday. I had my lamp on, I'm watching Power, and all of a sudden I just started to cry. And that was the first time since I was a kid that I'd ever cried in my life. And I'm thinking, and I like to work out why I do think the way that I do, and why my actions, like, why I'm doing the things that I do. And I started to think, why are you crying for? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, dude, why are you being soft for? Like, why are you crying right now? And I ended up coming to the conclusion, I had never, in 10 years hanging around the club, 15 years doing crime, I'd never ever felt safe in my own bed. Like, I'd always gone to sleep thinking the police are going to raid my house, someone I don't like is going to shoot up my window, people are going to run through my house. I'd never felt safe going to sleep in my own bed. And for that one moment in time, I was laying there in this room crying, and I thought, not one person in the world knows where I am right now, and I feel safe. Like, that is so messed up that you can't feel safe sleeping in your own bed. You know what I mean? Safe in your own home. There's no worse feeling than not feeling comfortable in your own home. Imagine going to sleep at night thinking you don't know whether you're going to wake up. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know what's going to happen while you're asleep. It's really not a good feeling. And a lot of kids need to know that is no way to live, man. Like, now that I live such a better life, I couldn't even imagine thinking that now. Yeah.
New mindset.
So that started that night sort of started my journey on. I decided that if I wanted to change, I had to become a better human. So there was no more holding grudges towards people. There was no more. I was very standoffish because I never wanted to let anyone in on my circle. I was like, I'd either think, oh, is this person a copper? Is this person out to do me harm? I don't trust this person. So I decided to just be kind to every person that I met, because you don't know what people are going through. So every interaction that I had, I just decided you're going to be the kindest person in the room. And because you can be kind and be tough at the same time, you know what I mean? You don't need to act tough to be tough, you know what I mean? So I just decided at that point in my life, I'm going to start being kind to people. And don't get me wrong, it's a journey. Like, it doesn't just happen overnight, but it come to a point where I would ring people from my hometown and I'd have conversations with them, and they'd be like, man, it's really, it's like I'm talking to a different person. I'd be like, what do you mean? And I didn't know, because I'm just me, you know what I mean? And they'd say, dude, from like how I knew you back then, like you're a completely different person. Like it's actually weird talking to you. And they'd say, it's like my friend's died and I've gained a new friend. Do you know what I mean? So that was a good feeling. But I noticed as soon as I'd go back home that as soon as I'd land on the airplane and land in Sydney, I would go straight back to that personality. Like it was just like a coping mechanism. I feel like I felt like in that area I had to be that person that I was when I lived there. It was just like my armor. So I've learned to work through that now. I started seeing a psychologist, which really helps, and I couldn't emphasize it enough that kids that are going through stuff, it's going to take you a while to find somebody that you feel comfortable with, but you need to talk to somebody. Like you can't do this all yourself. Like find a counselor, find a psychologist, and start talking to them. Just, you might not meet the good people. Like you might feel uncomfortable for the first 4 or 5 people, but you just keep going until you find that person that you feel comfortable enough to talk to. And I found a guy that was really good. He understood where I was coming from. He sort of told me that, because I still hold on to a little bit of chaos. There's still some times where I do get angry, and things do make me go to that old person. Like there's little triggers that make me do things. But he just said to me, man, that's just your brain. Like you've lived in chaos for so long. That is just your brain holding on to that tiny bit of chaos. Like you're trying so hard to be normal, and that's just your brain. The triggers just activate something in your brain, and your brain's like, yes, that's my little bit of time where I can be chaotic. Do you know what I mean? So it's going to take you a long time, and I'm still working through it now, 8 years later. But you will get there eventually. Just day by day, each day is just a new day. Man, when it makes it worth it, because you meet people that like don't know your background, and you get to know them, and you tell them nothing about your past, and then one day it sort of comes out, oh, you know, Ando used to be a Hell's Angel, and people look at me like, what? And they're like, man, you're one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And then you get into a conversation with them, and you sort of tell them about your past, and they're like, dude, I would never think that about you, hey. And once you get to that point, you get people that sort of open up to you, and you get the chance to help. Like you'll come across a kid that's getting into trouble, and you get that chance to give them a little bit of advice and be like, hey bro, I used to be like you, and and you tell them a story or two, and you say, man, I used to get into a lot of trouble when you might not think it now because I'm a completely different person, but back when I was your age, I was doing a lot of stuff that wasn't good, and you get that chance to like give back, and that's all I want to do. All I want to do is be that person that I met when I was 19 years old, and have that chance to like help me when I was a kid. I just want kids to be able to feel comfortable in their own skin and not be scared, and just have the opportunity to have someone, you know what I mean? You go and talk to somebody that is a psychologist or something, all right? They are going to help you, but as a kid, you're looking at them like, why am I going to listen to this guy? He hasn't been through what I've been through. But then when a kid meets someone like me and covered in tattoos and been through what they're going through, it's sort of someone that they can relate to. So my aim is to just help be that guy, be that older brother that kids can look at and be like, man, I'm going to listen to this guy because he's been through what I'm going through. He's done a lot more. He's experienced everything. He's been through it all. He's been through shootouts. He's been through robberies. He's been through everything, and he's someone I want to listen to. You know what I mean? I'm getting to that point where I feel like I can help a lot of kids. If you're a kid that's going through this stuff and you're struggling, you have no one to look up to, just like write to me. If I'll put my Instagram in here. You can write to me. Go see a psychologist. I'll help you out. I'll push you in the right direction. There's a lot of guys in Sydney that are doing this, that are helping kids as well. If you're struggling, just write to me, and I'll pass you on to some boys. No matter what area you're in, there's a lot of guys in Sydney that I can give you their Instagrams, and they can help you out and put you on that right path. And these guys have been through it as well. So they're guys that you want to look up to. They're guys that have been through the struggles, and now they're successful businessmen, and they know where you're coming from. So if you're struggling, just write to me, and I'll push you in the right direction. This is 10 years after leaving the club, multiple traumas. I still struggle with a lot of things in life, but now I know how to show my emotions. If I'm feeling sad, I'll have a cry. If I'm feeling angry, I'll yell. And just a couple of months ago, I was having a rough week, all right? A lot of things were going on, and I was just starting to think, like, what is my purpose in life? Why am I here? And I've always believed in God, I've always believed in Jesus, but I've always said it, I haven't acted on it, do you know what I mean? So there was one night and I broke down, man, and I was like, you know what? Why am I here? What is my purpose? I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this life. I'm going nowhere. Like, what if I... And I said to Jesus, I started praying, and I said, man, if I have a purpose, please show me a sign. I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. I just said, please just send me a sign. And I was on my knees. I was bawling my eyes out, and I went to sleep. All right, woke up the next day, completely normal, went to work. So I went to work normal. No one would have known anything that was going on with me. I went to work, and you can tell me if you think this is a coincidence, but there's too many things that line up for it to be a coincidence. So I've gone to work. I've worked on this job site for a year. There's a guy that come up to me that I've never seen that whole year working on this job site, all right? And he's come up to me, has neck tattoos, scars on his face, looks like a rough guy, and he's standing a metre away from me. And he's looking at me like he'd known me his whole life. And I'm thinking in my head, man, what have I done to this guy? Like, have I robbed him? Have I hurt him? Do you know what I mean? I was thinking, why is this guy staring at me like that? And all of a sudden he said to me, hey bro, what's your name? And he had a Brazilian accent, so I knew it wasn't someone I'd done anything to. So I was like, oh, my name's Ando, what's your name? And he told me his name. And he said, and this is, mind you, this is the day after I've prayed for Jesus and God to send me a sign and just say, if I'm here for a purpose, please send me a sign. And he said, bro, can I please tell you something? And I said, yeah, what's that? And he said, Jesus wanted to tell me that he loves you. And I stepped back and I said, what did you just say? And he said, Jesus wanted me to tell you that he loves you and he has a purpose for you. And I went, bro, why are you telling me that right now? And I started to like shed a tear, and I was like, what's going on right now? Why are you telling me that? And I sort of started to get angry, like, because I couldn't understand it. And I was like, dude, why are you telling me this right now? And he said, sometimes the Holy Spirit sends messages through other people. And man, I couldn't fathom it. I just broke down in tears. And I said, dude, you know, last night I prayed for Jesus to send me a message, and I was on my last straw, and this, what you've done for me today, man, it's giving me goosebumps talking about it right now. Yeah. And it's just weird me even talking about it. And man, that guy changed my life. He looked at me and he just said, brother, if you give your life to Jesus, he's going to take you places you've never been in life. Your life will be full of love. And man, I couldn't stop crying. Like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to act. And he just looked at me with love in his eyes, and he said to me, bro, do you mind if I give you a hug? And I said, man, I'd love one. And he hugged me, and I felt so much love coming from this man. And he just looked at me and he said, man, I come from the same life you did. Like, I've been through everything. Like, I was a junkie. I've done everything you could think, and Jesus saved my life. And man, just this person, like, you tell me if this is a coincidence. Someone I've never met in my whole entire life. I prayed the night before saying, send me a message. Someone I've never met in my whole entire life came up to me and said, Jesus loves you, and wanted me to tell you that. Like, that is not a coincidence. Like, that is fate. That is the Lord talking to you. Like, that is, if that doesn't change your life, I don't know what will. He then took down my number and he said, bro, do you mind if I message you? I said, man, I'd love you to. He walked away and he sent me a Bible verse, and the Bible verse was, I'll read it to you right now. It was John 3:16, and the Bible verse John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but live in eternal life. And after that he said, love, and sent me his name. And man, I don't know this guy from a bar of soap, and he's sending me something that, like, I'm looking at this just thinking, like, God sent his son Jesus, or the human version of him, to the world to take away our sins. And if you believe in him, you'll forever be welcomed into heaven. Like, I couldn't fathom, like to me, someone that has done everything that you've done. You've kidnapped people, shot at people, sold drugs, robbed drug dealers. For someone that's been through all of that, and Jesus is going to let you into heaven. Like, I can't fathom that, man. Like, that's what love is. Like, that's, from there, like, I could never live the same again. So that man is one of my closest friends now, and I give my life to him. If I never met that man, I don't know where I'd be right now. But that one moment in time, I'm just telling you, like, coming from me, if you don't believe in a higher power, you need to. Jesus Christ is real. I'm telling you right now. Like, you need to start reading the Bible, start praying, and he will find you. There's something that says in the Bible that take one step towards me, and the Lord will take one step towards you. And I'm telling you, that's the truth. So